Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobin, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Well, good evening and welcome into the Toasted Tavern. I am Michael Wagon Connect alongside my co-host, my partner in crime, Scott Tobin. And Scott, we talked about it last week. We're in the midst of the greatest time to be a sports fan, and this week does not disappoint as well. But before we get into all that, how was your week? How was opening day? And really, how are things been going for you?
Good, man. Good. It's like you said, it's a busy sports week, and it was a busy week for me at the stadium. The weather didn't necessarily cooperate all week. It was a little cold, a little windy, a little wet a couple of days. Yesterday was not the ideal day for a baseball game for sure, as it, lightly misted to lightly rained all day long, and the wind blew, and it was cold and brisk and nasty at Busch Stadium, but there were still 34,000 people at the ballpark, which, just shows, despite what some of the media wants to say that Cardinal fans aren't showing up, we still drew 30,000 people on a weekday night in April in not the greatest of weather with kids still in school. There's about 30 other Major League Baseball teams that would love to be drawing 30,000 on a weeknight.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was actually listening to the radio this morning, and they were talking about that exact thing where it's like, we're spoiled here. When we think 34,000 is a small amount of people, there's teams. You look at Oakland. I mean, I know that's a whole different kind of situation, but Oakland's only drawing a couple thousand fans.
Right.
So, 34 is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to people showing up for games. And again, it shows you just the support that the team has, despite all the struggles that they've had over the last couple of years, for sure.
Right, absolutely. Just wait till kids get out of school and families start going on vacations. Busch Stadium will be full again, and the Cardinals will be playing decent baseball. And we'll get into that and the Cardinal topic in a little bit.
Yeah, we got a lot to dive into today, especially locally with the Cardinals and the Blues, things going on there. A lot of national news as well. The Masters has gotten underway. We've got, we're going to talk about the national championship games. We've got so much to talk about, but two really, really big stories have kind of percolated their way to the top on a day like today. And, we'll talk about one when we get into the baseball conversation, but the one right off the bat and the one that I think was kind of shocking, but not shocking kind of at the same time, was the fact that came out today that O.J. Simpson passed away at 76 from cancer, and lots of mixed reactions to the passing of the football superstar, the Hollywood actor, the non-convicted murderer that, kind of sparked up a whole lot of different things in the mid-90s. But, he has passed away at the age of 76. A bit shocking, was it not?
It was. It was. I mean, we heard a few months ago that he had cancer and had been diagnosed. And so you knew it was something that was kind of coming. But, yeah, it just, it brought back so many memories as you watched the news today and saw all those video clips of all the things that happened in the mid-90s. And, you and I are not old, but we're old enough to remember. We didn't get to see OJ play, but we remember the days when he was on TV commercials and in the Naked Gun movies and all of those things, and was loved. And then what he went through with the murder trial and all of that. And it was shocking to me today to see people and hear people go, so now who was OJ Simpson? What was this all about? Kids that, are 20 or 30 didn't live through it, man. And it's crazy to think about, because I mean, we will probably never see a trial in our lifetimes that was as televised and talked about. And I mean, it was must-see TV when the OJ trial happened in the mid-90s.
Well, I remember in elementary school, I was in 5th grade, I believe, when all this went down. We actually stopped class during the verdict reading because it was such a big thing. And yeah, it definitely had some teaching moments as far as, the legal system and all of that. So it was definitely a learning moment. But the fact that we literally stopped class to hear the verdict being read on the non-guilty of OJ Simpson, it's something that, again, yes, you'll never see again, because it just doesn't seem like you could have something like this happen again. And, you talk about people not remembering who OJ Simpson is. If you do hear people like younger than us talking about, they may even be talking about, the robbery that he committed, or something that actually happened more recently that had no connection to what actually happened in the mid-90s. And it's crazy to sit there and think that this story doesn't have the play that it should, because again, we've talked about this many times. History is doomed to repeat itself if you don't remember the history. And we say that we'll never see anything like this again, but if no one knows about it and talks about it, it very well could happen again.
It really could. And, and it's funny. And we talk about people being young and not knowing their history. And people don't know, a lot of people didn't know who O.J. Simpson was at all. And then there's a lot of people that just know him as O.J. Simpson, the guy that murdered some people, and don't remember the fact that, there wasn't an athlete that was more beloved in the 80s and early 90s than O.J. Simpson. I grew up watching him do the Hertz commercials where he was stiff-arming people and jumping through the terminals. The Naked Gun movies, and he was a guest star on every TV show. He was one of the anchors of the NFL Today on NBC. And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but the first time we went to New York, we went to NBC Studios, and we actually were there while they were doing the rehearsals and saw Bob Costas and Ahmad Rashad. And OJ we didn't get to see OJ a whole lot. He was walking around in backstage, but OJ was there. And, those are memories that I have as a little kid, and stuff. And so, then to see him, we could, had the murder trial and everything that happened, and watched his life spiral, like you said, with the robbery where he was just retrieving items of his that had been taken, as he liked to say, and everything that went on afterwards. That, I don't know that we'll ever see an athlete fall from grace the way that OJ did, and such a tragic thing. And, while 99% of us are sure that he was a murderer, he was found not guilty, and, and so you have to say he was presumed innocent. And, like I said, it's an American history story that people should really pay attention to and learn about and read up on, because he had a fascinating life. Like I said, from growing up in poverty to becoming a Heisman Trophy winner at USC to going to Buffalo and becoming the Juice. That's what everybody talked about, the Juice, old OJ, in the 70s and 80s in Buffalo, then become the TV star, the movie star, the commercial star, and then the tragic fall from grace and the horrible crime that he was involved in, allegedly, and everything that went on after that. So, yeah, people should really, if you don't know about O.J. Simpson, you should really look into it, because it is a fascinating story.
Oh, it certainly is. And usually those stories are one of sheer exaggeration, but in this instance, it's not exaggeration. There are so many different pieces of his life that, you can look at and be like, oh, that's a moment. Oh, that's a moment. Oh, that's a moment. And, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the people that were affected by this, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman and their families. This is not in a sense a celebration or anything of that nature,
No, absolutely.
But those two names and those two families are connected as well. And, you always hope that things are better in a sense for them. And obviously, the fact that OJ had children, they are having to deal with the passing of their father, whether they had any indication of what actually went down or any of that stuff. These are kids that are now adults in a sense that have lost a parental figure. And, you hope that they're able to mourn in peace and that people don't come after them in a sense as well. So, there are many, many sides to this story and life in a sense. So, we don't want to make light of the fact that there are other people involved in it as well. And that also leads to a side note on all this as well, is, out of all the incidents that happened around that trial, what we got out of all that, and what would the world be at if things went differently? Because the Kardashians kind of came out of all of this as well. So there's again, just so many different pieces that kind of branch out from these events. It's just amazing how things are so interconnected. And again, we can't forget about the past, because there's some things we don't want to repeat.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I was just going to bring that up too. The world found out about Robert Kardashian and Kris Kardashian at that trial, because she was sitting there. She was friends with Nicole Brown Simpson, and her husband defended OJ, which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
And there have been rumors that Kris and OJ had more than a friendly relationship themselves during that time period. But yeah, so if you want to get mad and blame people and say, how in the world did we find out about the Kardashians? The beginning of the Kardashian family being a national institution was the O.J. Simpson trial.
Unbelievable. I saw, and I know at this point, it's hard to sit there and say you can joke about a person's passing. And I don't know what the time frame for something like this is because of everything that happened previously. But I did see some real chuckle-worthy tweets and stuff that went out today about his passing. And the best one that I saw was basically a head-on shot of the white Bronco and all the cop cars behind him on the highway that said, if OJ's not taken to the cemetery in this fashion, it's a travesty.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something we didn't even talk about. There's a lot of people that don't know what you're talking about there too, or don't remember. But will we ever again see millions of people sitting in front of their TVs watching a low-speed car chase through with a celebrity in the car as everybody wondered what was going to happen next? Is OJ and what was Al
Cowlings? Al Cowlings, yeah. And
driving
it was
around in a
during the
white
NBA.
Bronco.
It was during the NBA Finals too. Am I correct in that?
Yes, it was. Yeah, they broke away from the finals. Bob Costas, OJ's friend, was like, okay, so now I have to go from talking about the NBA Finals to talking about my friend in a car chase.
Now that is a story that we need to find a way to pull out of Mr. Costas at some point. Is what was that experience like? And who knows, maybe with everything going on with his passing now, that is a story that may come out as he may release some sort of statement. That would be an interesting story to hear as well, how all that was to be processed in his mind. And as he is just such a great orator of telling stories as well. He grew up with the Jack Bucks and the Harry Careys and all of that. It'd be a great story to hear what that all entailed in his mind while he was doing everything live.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure there were a million things going through his mind, and it was probably surreal for him at the time.
So O.J. Simpson dead at the age of 76 from cancer. I think that's enough talk about about death and just despair in a sense. Let's move into, well, I guess not death, but kind of despair, and let's talk a little bit about the St. Louis Cardinals and what's gone down in the first couple weeks of the season. I can't sit there and say we're disparaged by what's gone down. I think you and I both talked about this a little bit last week. If we come out of this Philly-Arizona stretch and we're right around 500, I think you actually can feel positive about the start of your season, because you went up against the Dodgers for 4. You thought maybe the Marlins coming into the season would have been a tough test as well. They took 2 of 3 from Miami on their opening weekend and then lost 2 of 3 to the Phillies, who, again, are going to be right up near the top of the NL East. And now you're going to go in against a very tough Arizona team who was in the World Series last year. But truth be told, you're not sure what kind of team you're going to get with the Diamondbacks this year as well. Were they an overachiever last year, or were they the real deal? So, like I said, we talked last week about it. Where we're sitting right now isn't out of the realm of possibility of where we thought they were going to be, maybe a little bit better than what we thought they were going to be. Are you still thinking the same thing after seeing this Miami and Philly 6-game series?
Yeah, absolutely, because you look at that series, and other than the game that Kyle Gibson had the horrible first inning where it kind of got away from him, they were in every one of those games. The Cardinals battled back in that first game in Philly. Mason Wynn with the big 2-out, 2-strike hit in the bottom of the 9th to tie the game up. And then, you go into extra innings and you have that stupid rule with the runner on second base. And, you can question some of Ollie's decisions in that. I don't know that I walk Bryce Harper there, because then you put a second runner on base and then a base hit leads to 2 runs all of a sudden. And you end up losing that game, but you put up quite a fight there. Then you win the second game. And then, the game yesterday, you look at it and, first inning, Philly shouldn't have scored. Victor Scott loses a ball in the rain that normally he catches. It falls 2 runs. It leads to 2 runs. Cardinals come back. You get 2 runs. Herrera and Donovan hit solo home runs to tie it up. And then you go into, then you get into the 6th inning. Lance Lynn threw a lot of pitches yesterday, which you can kind of understand. Nobody had a real good grip on the ball pitching wise. All the pitchers threw a lot of pitches. But Lynn was at 96 pitches after 5 innings. I have to question Ollie's use of the bullpen here. You had a short bullpen, but I think he decided to go to Andre Palante, which Palante has not been sharp again this year in the little bit of time we've seen him. You bring him in, he faces 5 batters. All 5 of those guys reach base. They score 2 runs. And then you go to Zach Thompson, who, you really have to wonder why Zach Thompson wasn't the guy you bring in a long relief situation there when he's stretched out. It would have been his spot to pitch the night before, but he didn't because of the return of Sonny Gray. And so you bring Thompson in there in a jam, and he pitches 2 1/3 innings, and he strikes out 5 guys, and the Phillies don't get a base runner. And then the Cardinals battle back again. You're down 4-2. You get into the bottom of the 8th. Victor Scott, again, the kids played really, really well. this rookie year. I don't want to pile on him too much, but he gets an infield single, gets to first base, and as he's crossing first base, turns towards second, makes that move, runs down the baseline, and Phillies run down and tag him out because he never got back into foul territory. He would have been on first base. The first pitch to Brendan Donovan's a wild pitch. He would have been on second. Donovan grounded out. He would have gone to third. Contreras gets a base hit. Gorman gets on base. Arenado gets an RBI single. 1 run scores. If Scott's on base, you have 2 runs and the game's tied. So, a couple of mistakes by a rookie who really hadn't made any mistakes in this point, and you've got a tied game again, and, you never know. Instead of talking about losing 2 out of 3 against the Phillies, you win 2 out of 3, and with the exception of the extra inning game where, like I said, the base runner kind of screwed Ryan Helsley up there in the first game, and then Palante yesterday, the pitching outpitched the Phillies. I mean, in 2 days, I just talked about Lance Lynn pitching pretty well for 5 innings yesterday. Lance Lynn outpitched the Phillies yesterday, and then Sonny Gray, who we haven't really talked about, made his Cardinal debut through 5 innings on a 63 pitch count and outpitched Zach Wheeler on Tuesday night. So the Cardinals really outpitched Philadelphia. And when you look at it, I think you have to really say that they could have very easily won 5 out of the, 4 or 5 of the games that they've lost. So I feel really good about where they're at right now, honestly, considering the fact that the big boys in your lineup still are not hitting.
Yeah, that's the big thing. And as our friend Blues Fan reacts, pitching has surprised everyone for sure. Who knows how long that will last? The concern is that offense that has not caught up to it. And that's a big, big piece, is that the offense has kind of struggled outside of Ivan Herrera. He's been really, really good in kind of place of Wilson Contreras. He's been dealing with that hand issue after being plunked near the end of that San Diego series. He's done really, really well on that spot. But everybody else, Goldschmidt after game 1 against the Dodgers has really struggled. Nolan Arenado has picked up a couple RBIs here and there, but he hasn't done a whole lot as well offensively. You're missing kind of a top of the lineup kind of guy. And I can't believe that I'm going to say this, but you are kind of missing a Tommy Edman at the top of the lineup. Not to say he got on a lot, but he did know how to get on when the time was needed. And a Lars Nootbaar as well, able to get on base. But this team still, even with those guys, they don't have that prototypical leadoff guy. And you were hoping maybe that could be a guy like Victor Scott. He's struggled at the plate. And I know you said he's not really made any mistakes outside of yesterday, but you could tell at the plate he's kind of overmatched right now. He's hitting .091, okay? He has 1 RBI, 2 stolen bases. Yes, when he gets on the base pass, he is very dangerous. He's played a very good center field. Do not get me wrong. I don't want you to hear me wrong. I wanted him to on the opening day roster before Carlson got hurt. I thought he deserved a shot to prove himself at the top of the top league in a sense. But you're starting to hear the question of, is he someone that maybe you do keep up here when you get the Nootbaars and the Carlsons back? I mean, Nootbaar was activated today, so he'll be with the team in Arizona. You're still going to want to find ways to kind of work him back into the lineup, so you don't necessarily want to get rid of another extra outfielder at this point. They sent down, They sent down Pages today to make room for Nootbaar. But when Newt is back in the lineup, is that an idea in your head that maybe you let Scott go back down to the minors, kind of get himself a little bit right at the plate, and then bring him back a little bit later on? I still think he has a place on this team at some point this year, but if you're hitting .091 and your team's still not doing a whole lot around you, you can't hide him at the bottom of the lineup and maybe see if he can get a couple walks here and there, get on the bases and run around a little bit. You got to find a way to get him hitting at the plate to help this team, because nobody else, again, outside of Herrera, is really doing much.
I'm going to disagree with you. I don't care if he's hitting 050. I'm keeping him up here because of his because of his defense. Because they don't have anybody else on this ball club that can play center field like he does. Yeah, he made a mistake yesterday. It's the first mistake the kid's made in 12 games, and it was raining, and it was a low cloud deck. You couldn't see the arch yesterday. It's easy to understand how in the rain and in those clouds, in a major league ballpark, dealing with those conditions for the first time, he made a mistake. But other than that, he's played flawless defense, and he's made the other outfielders around him play better defense because they know that he can get to balls. It takes pressure off of them, and it allows them to do other things because you have that speed. I mean, I watched him over the weekend, man, and he was catching up to balls that you didn't think there was any way he was going to get to coming in and going back that Tommy Edman, Lars Nootbaar, Dylan Carlson, none of the three of them get to some of the balls that he got to over the weekend. So that fact, I keep him up just because of that fact. And yeah, he hasn't gotten on base a whole lot, but if you look at it, he's still scored almost as many runs as anybody on the team, even though he's not hitting. When he gets on base, he finds a way to score. And yeah, he is overmatched a little bit, except here's what I'll say. When you watch him, he's not overmatched on the fastball. He's catching up to fastballs, and he's hit a lot of balls hard right at people and had some bad luck with his offense. Does he need to be able to recognize the changeup and the curveball a little bit better and not chase? Yeah, but I think that's something you can work on up here. And I'm going to steal this from somebody. I heard somebody else talking about this today, so I'm not going to take full credit for this take. But if you're trying to learn how to hit off-speed pitching and you're trying to learn how to be a major league hitter on the fly, would you rather have him doing it in the minor leagues with a bunch of other kids, or would you rather have him up here doing it with the best hitting coach in your organization, or supposedly the best hitting coach in your organization, your major league hitting coach, and with guys like Goldie and Arenado, who, yeah, they're cold right now, but, they can teach him how to pick up on things and give him little hints. And, you've got a guy like Willie McGee out there that's done it, that can work with him. I think he's going to get more. I think he's going to learn more, and I think it's going to not stunt his growth as much if he tries to learn it and figure it out here. If he's up here and you're like, okay, yeah, you've struggled now for a while. We've decided that you're not really good. We're going to send you down in the minors for a couple of months. That might put him in even more of a tailspin. You just never know. It might be better to leave him up here, let him figure it out, and see if he can progress and get some things going offensively. I thought yesterday, okay, that little hit on the infield is really going to turn things around, because a lot of times you see that happen. You get that first little number of a hit, and then you get going. Unfortunately, he had a bad break when he made the turn, and it was a minor turn. I didn't see it happen, but I realized as soon as I saw the pitcher point, I'm like, oh man, he must have made that turn at first base. But he was so far down, because he'd flown down the line. He was so far down the right field line, he had no chance to get back. So I say you keep him up here unless what happened yesterday gets to him. If in the next couple of days you put him out there and you see him, seeming hesitant on a fly ball, or seeming hesitant at the bases, then you have to sit him down, because then it's got to do his head, and you've got to get him down there and let him have success. If he comes out tomorrow and he looks good in center field, and if he finds a way to get on base, or if he takes good at bats, then I just keep him up here and keep him plugging, man, because I really think he is your best option in center field, and I think he's your best option to make this defense better, which is really what this team is leaned on at this point, is pitching and defense. And like I said, when you have a pitching staff that pitches to contact, you need that guy in center field that can get to every ball that you can, and can make up for some of the lack of range that Jordan Walker has, and some of the lack of range that Brendan Donovan has when he's in left field. Like you said, Newt's going to be back tomorrow, but you're still going to have days where you have an Alec Burleson out there, or you have whatever. So in my mind, I just keep him up here as long as you can, as long as you don't see him really start to lose confidence. And right now, and listening to him yesterday, I don't think he did.
So it's kind of like, when Yadi was up here in his rookie year, you almost let defense win out in this argument of, if the defense is helping and it far exceeds the struggles at the plate, it's something that you can stick with. And I think I can agree with that. And I understand it, because I think Yadi did win more games with his defense than his bat early on in his career. And that's exactly what a guy like Victor Scott can do as well. I think where it gets difficult in saying, yeah, we can keep plugging away at that, is when everybody else is struggling as well. Because when Yadi was doing what he was doing, he had a team around him that was able to pick him up offensively. And this is not in any way, shape, or form Victor Scott's fault that the offense isn't surrounding him with support in a sense. And I can totally understand if they keep him up here, they keep plugging him out there, and he keeps playing superb defense and doing what he can on the base paths. But if this team offensively isn't doing anything to support him, it gets a little bit harder, because, yeah, you sit there and say he scored almost as many runs as anybody else on this team. Well, that's because the team hasn't scored a ton of runs. So it's not like he's going out there and walking a whole bunch of times and being driven in 10, 15, 20 times, despite hitting, if he hits 150 or what have you. If he's getting on base and all this is working and the offense is bringing him in, that's great. That's huge. I'm just saying, as fans are going to probably point out, if he's struggling and the entire offense is struggling, why are you keeping him in there? Why not get him some work with a team that maybe is going to produce some runs like Memphis can? I'm just putting it out there, just being devil's advocate. I think, again, I wanted him on the opening day roster. I think he does provide a lot of good things defensively. And yeah, you're right. What better way to learn how to work on hitting a curveball or an off-speed pitch than doing it against the best of the best? Because down on the minors, you're only going to get 1 out of 7 pitchers probably that's going to have a chance at making the major league. So it's not like you're seeing major league pitching every time you go out there down in the minors. Yeah, it's great to get yourself back into the swing of things. Maybe you go down there, have a 7 for 10 week or couple of games, and boom, everything starts to click. You can come back up and do that. But on the flip side, you're also not expanding yourself a ton as well. So I would totally get it if this is the direction that they go. I'm just pointing out that with guys coming back, with a new par coming back, if Carlson gets back here in the next couple of weeks, if that might be the time frame that you were just speaking about, that if Carlson's coming back at the end of April, if at the end of April Victor Scott's still hitting 125 and still striking out more than he's walking, maybe at that point that's enough of a sample size for you to say, okay, you did a lot. Your defense was awesome. It helped us stay in a lot of games. But if the offense is struggling, you're getting guys back and they're healthy, and the team is kind of at that 500 point still, that might be a decision that they have to make.
Yeah. Like I said, I would give it a couple of weeks. Maybe when Carlson comes back, you see where he's at. Again, if he's still playing really well, I still keep him out there in center field, and Carlson is your 4th outfielder like you'd planned when the season started. But, again, if he's hitting under 100 in 2 or 3 weeks and things are not going well, then you do have to think about it. But I just really think you leave him out there for a little bit longer. I mean, we're talking about 12 games, 13 games. It's not a huge sample size. And think about the pitching that he's faced in those 13 games. It's not like he's faced the Pirates and the Cubs and some of the A's. Let's see what he does against some of those teams. But I mean, you've run into Zach Wheeler, and you've run into Yu Darvish, and you've run into Tyler Glasnow, and you've run into, it's been some of the best pitchers in the National Leagues that he's faced. Yeah. So, let's see what he does when he gets some of the guys that aren't in the top 2 or 3% of the National Leagues as far as starting pitchers. And, my other point, and I agree with you in one way, and at the same time, if your offense is struggling, no matter what Victor Scott does, your offense isn't going to win or lose games because of Victor Scott.
True.
It's got to be Paul Goldschmidt. It's got to be Nolan Arenado. It's got to be Jordan Walker. You can't be counting on Victor Scott to carry your offense. If you're counting on Victor Scott to carry your offense, then your team's in a whole lot of trouble. And that's just the way it is. And you talk about this offense, the 2 best hitters you've got right now are the other 2 rookies on the team, and Mason Wynn and Ivan Herrera.
Yeah.
And they're 2 of the top 3 rookies in baseball in batting average right now. So, they're doing well. Nolan Gorman's showing some signs. He's hit some home runs this week. He's showing some signs of coming out of it. Brendan Donovan has played pretty well the last week and a half or so. He's shown signs of coming out of it. Arenado got a big hit yesterday, which a clutch hit, which we haven't seen a whole lot of. Hopefully that gets him going. The thing you have to hope for, you go to Arizona. We know that Paul Goldschmidt absolutely destroys the Diamondbacks. If there's a place that's going to get him going, it might be Arizona, where he gets on a tear. And if you get Goldie hot, we all know that Goldie can carry this team, and it's only a matter of time before Nolan gets hot too. The thing that I find interesting with Nolan, I don't know if you saw this story. It came out, and I don't remember if Derek Gould put it out there or if it was Katie Wu, one of the two. But Nolan said he was having some trouble picking up the ball. And if you watch him swing, he hasn't been taking full swings. It's almost like he's been punching at the ball, just trying to make contact. There have been a lot of times where I've not seen a Nolan Arenado swing. It's almost like he's half swinging and just trying to put the ball in play, which tells you that he's not seeing the ball right. So you have to wonder, you hope there's not a vision thing there. If there is, I'm sure it's something that can be corrected. But, you wonder if it's something like that visually that, maybe he needs a different prescription contact-wise or something along those lines, a little something. Because, at some point, Nolan Arenado hasn't hit a home run since the end of August. Part of that was because he was injured in September last year. You know, he had the back issues and a couple other things last year, didn't play the last couple of weeks. So you look at that, you know, at some point we're going to see Nolan Arenado. He just really has not driven the ball yet. Pretty much everything's been on the ground, and he's been hitting a lot of stuff to the right side of the field, which he does not do when he's normal Nolan tongue-tied there. Normal Nolan Arenado pulls the ball a lot when he's right, and we just haven't seen a whole lot of that yet. So I think though there's a little thing there that we can figure out now that he's talking about it. Maybe we can get him straightened out. Hopefully Arizona gets Goldie going, and you know the way this pitching's going, man. If you can get those guys going, this team still has the potential to be really scary. The other guy that's got to get going is Jordan Walker. Jordan Walker's done almost nothing to this point. Although I will say on this homestand, he hit about 3 balls to dead center field that the center fielder caught either jumping over the wall or right up against the wall. So he did just miss a couple, but he's not been hot. He's not been hitting the ball like we saw him hit, you know, either half of the season last year, the first half of the season when he was hitting for contact before they sent him down, and then the second half when we saw him hit for some power. He's just not been able to do either one of those things to this point. But there is a bright side. Mason Wynn hitting way better than I think anybody expected to see him be hitting at this point in the season, which is a bright spot.
Yeah, and this team does have bright spots, and that's the thing. I think coming into the season, when you saw the youth that was on this team, you can almost say that you expected this team to struggle because you've got a lot of young guys that are trying to learn how to play at the major league level. Yes, Jordan Walker got a taste of it last year, spent a good portion of the season up here, so he's going to be a guy that you can look at to kind of lead those younger guys. And Mason Wynn got a short cup of coffee with the team last year, but he has shown that he belongs here. Herrera has definitely shown, I think, that he has the reins to that backup catcher position. And honestly, if Contreras wants to continue to just DH and allow Herrera to catch a bunch of games, that's perfectly fine because it gives you a couple of different options of pop in the lineup. And, you know, the DH position, in my mind, is still kind of still not been figured out by a lot of National League teams. I mean, the American League teams for the longest time knew exactly what they needed as far as a designated hitter was concerned. Still think the National League teams are playing National League ball in that sense. So their designated hitters, for the most part, aren't the power guys that you saw in the American League. So if you can get a guy like a Contreras into that spot for a good portion of the season, if that's the way that things play out, then it's okay because he does bring that pop to the designated hitter position. And here's more from Blues fan. Long used card strategy of letting Nato and goalie drag the team kicking and screaming to victories can't work anymore. Yes, there's a bright young future, but it's exactly that, the future. And I get that. I do. I think this team is trying to prepare themselves for the next couple of years, but this division is so weak that if you can find a way to put some wins together and send yourself to the top of this division, you can get into the playoffs and you give that future the opportunity to play in the playoffs as well. So it's an interesting conundrum that this team has kind of been put into because it's kind of like a soft rebuild. And this is kind of where we're at. We're in a spot where it's a soft rebuild in a weak division that, you know, if they do something as far as going on a run here, you know, the All-Star break and then in the trade deadline, maybe you look at making a move and trying to get into the playoffs. There's a lot of different things that can go on with this team this year. And like you said, I kind of want to, this is a long way of getting back to the pitching in a sense, but you know, the pitching has been decent this year. Yeah. You got the one, you know, Kyle Gibson instance in that last game against Miami where he kind of got blown up. You also had the first game against the Dodgers where it was kind of, not so great pitching wise, but outside of that, it's been relatively good. And I'm interested because I got to go back to that first game against Philadelphia, and it ended up being that 5-3 loss, obviously in extra innings. But Miles Michaelis was pitching well. He was pulled after 6 2/3. He had given up 2 runs. He had given up 6 hits, but he was only at 89 pitches. And I'm a little interested in your thought on why the decision was made to pull Miles at 89 pitches before he got to the 7th inning. I didn't get a chance to watch the game live, so I wasn't sure exactly the situation of what was going on, but it does seem odd when you have a bullpen that has kind of been used, especially used the day before in that game against Miami. What was the thought process of keeping or pulling him at 89 pitches?
I'm sure that I didn't hear Ollie's comments after the game. I'm sure that it's, early in the season and he's not super stretched out all the way yet. And they were at 89 pitches and they felt comfortable. I know I would have left him in there. He was 6 1/3. I leave him in there and let him try to finish that 7th, get him into that mid 90s pitch mark and see what happens. But, that's not how managers do things these days in baseball. You get to 89, 90 pitches and, we got to get him out of there, especially early in the season. I'm like you. I would have liked to have seen him, leave him out there, and let him finish that inning. But that's kind of how they're going. I'm going to counter your last argument real quickly, though. Everybody wants to talk about how weak the National League Central is. Look around the standings in baseball. Everybody goes,
right
"Oh, see." Everybody goes, "Oh, see, look, the Cardinals are in last place." Guess what, people? Take the Cardinals out of the National League Central. Where would they be in the National League East? Oh, they'd be in second place behind the Braves. Where would they be in the West? Second place behind the Dodgers. Where would they be in the American League West? Second place behind the Rangers. I mean, the National League Central right now is the best division in baseball. Is it going to stay that way? No, probably not. Are the Pirates going to play the way they have? Probably not. Are the Brewers going to play the way they have? Probably not. Are the Cardinals' bats going to stay cold and is Goldie going to hit 190 and is Arenado going to hit 220? Probably not. So, things are going to switch. And, I don't think the division's as bad as we want to think it is. And I don't think the other divisions are as good as we want to think they are. I think there's the Braves and the Dodgers. And the Braves lost Spencer Strider for the year. So let's just knock down some of the expectations for the Braves as the year goes along. And, the Cardinals get some healthy hitting and get some guys heated up. And this team may really make a real run.
And that's the crazy thing. And again, just more about this, don't lock yourself into the Krug Falk situation by going out there and trying to, buy something that is a short-term success. Don't let basically not sacrificing the future for a chance to win now. But this is the thing, Mason. This is St. Louis. People will sell their soul for a championship. The fact that the Cardinals, haven't won a World Series since 2011 is just egregious in a lot of fans' minds. And if they miss the playoffs in consecutive years, it's time to blow everything up. It's time to get rid of everybody. And I'm not going to be on that train. I think, there are going to be moments in years where you have to do these soft rebuilds. And again, I talk about we're spoiled. This is a very spoiled city when it comes to success in sports that don't result in championships. I mean, you've seen how well the Cardinals have done in my lifetime, and outside of the late 80s, early 90s, this team and franchise has been a winning organization, whether they're a championship winning squad or if it's just having winning records and getting into the playoffs. It's still a winning organization. When you look at the Blues, they went on a ridiculous streak of playoff appearances. Yes, they didn't win a Stanley Cup, but they continuously made the playoffs year in and year out, and then getting into the salary cap era and still being able to get into the playoffs. And then what they've been able to do the last 10 years with getting into the playoffs and winning a Stanley Cup and finishing with winning records. All of these things are ways that have spoiled us. And there are a lot of fans out there that can't handle when a team struggles, finishes under 500, or doesn't make the playoffs. And even to the point now we've gotten where fans can't deal with the fact that this team would make a playoff, win a playoff series, and then lose. It's championship or bust. And that's the problem is we've gotten used to success that when it's lesser success, it's not good enough.
Right. Yeah, you have people complaining about 2019. Oh, you went to the National League Championship Series. Well, you didn't win. You didn't do anything. You got swept in the National League Championship Series. Why are we celebrating that? Well, how many teams in baseball would love to say they've been to the National League Championship 3 times since 2011? Not a whole lot of teams can say that. But like you said, fans in St. Louis are spoiled and they expect to win. As far as talking about, giving away the future to try to win this year, the Cardinals won't do that. John, that's not something the Cardinals will do. Will they try to go out and make a move potentially at the trade deadline to get a pitcher? Yes, but they're not gonna mortgage the future. They're not gonna give away 4 or 5 of their top prospects or their best young players. They're gonna give away they might give away one. You might give away a guy that a Tink Hintz or somebody like that who in a couple of years could be, but you're not going to see them trade a Jordan Walker and a Gordon Graceffo and 3 or 4 of those guys to try to win this year. They may make a move and they may trade a couple of people that people aren't happy about, but they're not going to do anything to try to win any year that jeopardizes the future or jeopardizes their possibility of winning for more than just 1 year.
Well, and I want to just point this out. I just pulled this up because it got me thinking about playoff droughts and things of that nature. And we talk about being spoiled. There are 2 teams right now that have gone 9 seasons since making the playoffs. And I want to quickly ask you if you know who those 2 teams are. And if you don't, I'll tell you, and then I'll tell you why it's so incredibly crazy that those are the 2 teams. Who do you believe are those 2 teams that have gone 9 years since making the playoffs?
9 years since making the playoffs in Major League Baseball. Let's see. Let me think.
I'll give you a hint. They're both American League teams.
I can't think of anybody that's been. The Tigers would be one, probably.
The Tigers are one, 2015 to the present, after losing
And
the
the
World.
Royals?
That is incorrect. It is incorrect. This team has had quite possibly 3 of the best players in Major League Baseball.
Yep. Go ahead.
And it's shocking, but the Los Angeles Angels.
Angels.
The Angels have gone 9 seasons. So you could talk about having a powerhouse team in a sense with having the best player in a position or the best player in the game. And that still doesn't do a hill of beans because you can't make it into the playoffs. So again, we could be Angels fans where we're seeing history unfolding in front of our eyes when it comes to individual players, but do not get a chance to see a playoff run or a World Series. And there's teams that are even worse off. I mean, you talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates or some teams of those nature. And that's not to say anything about Pittsburgh fans or the city or anything like that, because they've got a beautiful stadium. Fans there that support the team are great. And they've got a lot of young talent that's coming up this year that's very, very exciting. But they're a team that has perennially struggled since the 90s. And yes, they've had some times here and there. They've made the playoffs here and there. But for the most part, they're a under 500 team. I can understand when somebody gets excited about a little bit of a run and a little bit of a winning streak there. They're going to be happy to finish above 500. In St. Louis, if you finish at 500 or above, it's a failure.
Well, absolutely. And, and talking about the Angels, and people in the city get upset. Oh, the Cardinals don't spend money. The Cardinals don't try to win. Think about this. Think about the teams that the Dodgers have had for the last 10 years and all the talent that have cycled through there and all the money they've spent. How many championships have they won? 1. And when was it? It was the COVID-shortened season of 2020.
You wanted to say stupid year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only time they won with all the money and all the talent that they brought through that ball club. I mean, look at the Braves in the 90s. When they win the East? 17 years in a row, something like that, and they won 1 World Series. I mean, so, it's luck as much as anything else when you get to the postseason. It's being hot at the right time and being healthy at the right time. And the Cardinals proved that in 06 and 11. So, it's just, like I said, this team, a lot of people don't like this team. A lot of people don't think the Cardinals spend enough money, and the media is a big problem about this, because if you turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you hear nothing positive about the Cardinals, no matter what happens. I mean, this is how bad it was. And I'm going to throw out a guy that I respect very much, but Randy Carricker this morning, had Greg Amsinger on. And Greg Amsinger was talking about Sonny Gray and was like, man, you guys had to have watched Sonny Gray. You had to be so happy with Sonny Gray. I mean, Sonny Gray showed you what he's going to bring to this team, and he could be the ace of this ball club. And Randy Carricker said, yeah, I'm not excited. He's not really a number 1. At what point do you have to go, okay, so maybe he's not a prototypical name to be a number 1, but if the guy was the runner-up in the AL Cy Young last year, and I mean, he's been dominant pretty much everywhere he's been, except for his couple of years in New York when he went from Oakland to the Yankees. He struggled there. but he was good in Oakland. He was good in Cincinnati. He was good in Minnesota. I mean, he's a solid, he's not an ace. I wouldn't say he's an ace, but I would say he's a one. He's that guy that's going to go out there and give you 6 or 7 innings every night. And he's going to have a high 2s, low 3 ERA. He's going to strike out 5 or 6 guys, and he's going to keep you in pretty much every game he pitches. And if you have that, that's going to keep you competitive, and that's something that we haven't had in a couple of years. And if you get a Miles Michaelis to step up and be the guy that he was a couple of years ago, which the last couple of times he's gone out there, he's looked like he could be. And what if Steven Matz, he's looked really good. What if we're finally seeing the Steven Matz we thought we were going to get when we signed him from the Mets? What if Matz emerges? What if Kyle Gibson is the guy that was in Baltimore last year that won 16 games? This rotation has the potential to be a really solid rotation. And then, if they do that and you get to the trade deadline, there could be some pitching out there that you may be able to get. Like somebody said, you look at the Marlins. The Marlins might have a fire sale at the trade deadline the way things are going right now.
But they didn't win a World Series last year. How can they have a fire sale?
I know, right? And another team that could have a whole bunch of people on the trade block because it may be the end of their magical run. Look at the Houston Astros. The Astros are 4-10 right now with a whole bunch of guys that are free agents next year. You can see some of those pitchers be on the trade block. So this might be the year that the Cardinals get to the trade deadline, and all of a sudden there are 2 or 3 pitchers out there that you're able to go get. You bring them in, and all of a sudden you do make that run that everybody wants to see, and you don't have to mortgage the future. So let's just calm down and say that we're 13 games into the season, and let's get through April. Because remember, before the season started, everybody's like, "Oh man, look at this schedule. They're going to be 9-19 just like they were last year." Well, we're a game under 500 right now, and we've been in pretty much every game but 2. So, I feel pretty good about it because, like I said, the pitching has kept us competitive. The defense has played really well, and our offense just hasn't totally clicked yet, which I think it will. So I feel pretty good about this team. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but that's just me.
Well, again, you kind of hit on the key point. It's early in the season. This is just the second week of the regular season. You can't make snap judgments that early in the season, especially when you've gone up against 2 of the top 3 teams in the National League, and the Dodgers and the Phillies, who, could very well win the NL East as well. So you come out of it a game under 500. Yes, maybe you should be at 500 or a game above 500 if you end up beating the Marlins in that Sunday game. But it's still going to be one of those moments where you're going to look back maybe at the end of April and just go, yeah, this team is actually better than we thought they were going to be. So it's still a lot to watch. And I want to touch on one more thing on the Cardinals, but baseball in general, before we move into the other big baseball story that kind of popped up today as well. More continued on. But I'm going back to what you said about what Randy Carricker said. And I think we need to recognize as sports fans and sports media, and this is not just baseball related, but there needs to be a differentiation between a number 1 and an ace.
Right.
You can have a number 1 starter that can sit at the top of your rotation and win you games, but you may not have an ace. And that's a big, big difference. And aces are becoming fewer and far between. And I liken this to, the NHL and number 1 goaltenders as well. We're well past the age of a number 1 guy. And it's because of load management. It's because of the length of the season and just so many different things. And the skill level of goaltending has risen as well. I mean, we've talked about it with the Blues over the last handful of years. You got a couple of guys that are like 1A, 1B. It's the same thing when it comes to pitching. You have an ace or you have a number 1. That's the difference. Not a lot of teams have aces. Every team has a number 1, and they could be a really good pitcher, but you necessarily do not have an ace. And I think we need to get past the fact that not every number 1 is an ace pitcher. If we can get past that, then maybe we can sit there and say, okay, maybe a Sonny Gray isn't an ace, but he is a number 1 pitcher that will more likely than not go out there and either win you a game or keep you in a game long enough for you to eventually find a way to win. I think we just need to get past that.
I agree. And that's another thing that we were spoiled with the Cardinals. think about it. When you go back to the early 2000s, we had basically an ace in the number one for 12, 13, 14 years because we had Darryl Kyle and Matt Morris. You had ace in the number one. Then Darryl Kyle goes away. You have Matt Morris and Chris Carpenter for a couple of years. Then Matt Morris goes away. And then we had all those years of Chris Carpenter and Adam Wainwright where they were both in the Cy Young competition every year for 4 years in a row. They were 1-3 or 2-3 in the Cy Young voting. So, we were spoiled in that aspect as well. So, we may not have that ace right now, but I think Sonny Gray could be a number one. And if you have a number one and a solid 2 and 3, you're going to be okay. And what did everybody say? Oh, this rotation doesn't have the pitching that can pitch with what the Braves have, with what the Dodgers have, what the Phillies have. Well, guess what? You just went up against Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola with Sonny Gray and Lance Lynn, and they both outpitched them.
Hey, that's all you can hope for. Sometimes you just have a guy that's got a good day, and they can beat an ace. And then when you get to the playoffs, that could be the moment where that happens. I mean, Chris Carpenter was an ace, but Roy Halladay was much more of an ace, and Chris Carpenter outdueled him in a crucial playoff game. So it all comes down to the makeup of the pitcher. Early in the season, yes, maybe they're not in the complete mindset of shutdown. It's more about finding their pitches. It's more about finding ways to get through a certain amount of innings or a certain amount of pitches. But when playoffs roll around, who knows? That switch can be flipped, and all of a sudden he goes from a number one to an ace. And we've seen it multiple times as well here in St. Louis. But okay, enough talk about the Cardinals. We do have one more story to talk about with baseball. It's kind of a big one, and it's one that I don't think either one of us thought we might see in our lifetime, in a sense, especially after everything that has kind of gone down in Major League Baseball around this, and it's sports betting, and it's the Shohei Ohtani instance. I mean, we had more details kind of come out today about his interpreter and what the government's charging him with, and it is just absolutely mind-boggling. And again, it makes you question how much Ohtani knew, how much Ohtani participated, and how much of a fall this guy is going to be taking for a superstar and the face of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost have more questions than answers after everything that came out today. I mean, they came out today and said that in a 2-year period, Ohtani's interpreter made 19,000 bets. They broke that down. That's 30 bets a day for 2 years. If Ohtani's his best friend, he lives with him, and they're spending basically every moment together, how do you not notice that the guy's making 30 bets a day?
And we talked about this before we went on, and I gave a very, very razor-thin potential explanation to that kind of mindset because there is a very, very tiny potential that Ohtani did know nothing about this, because you look at the sports betting that goes on nowadays, so much of it is digital that it's not like this guy is going to the casino 30 times a day to place a bunch of different bets. You could place 30 bets on one parlay, in a sense, on an app, and you go from there. I don't know how that works because I don't do any sports betting, so I don't know if you can actually do that. But in a sense, you could probably place 30 different bets on your phone with no one really noticing what you got going on. I mean, how does it work? You could probably place 30 bets in the course of 3 bathroom breaks in a day. But that I can explain away. I can also somewhat explain away how Ohtani maybe didn't know some of the money was missing. If his interpreter helped set up the bank accounts, if his interpreter impersonated him when the bank called, I could see, again, a very small argument of him not knowing. But when you get to the amount of money that has been lost, you said it perfectly when we were getting ready to go on air. You're like, how do you not know that $16 million or $40 million just goes away? I know he signed a massive contract, but how do you not know that that amount of money is going? Even if your best friend goes, hey, I need $16 million to invest in this really new idea. At some point, before you give him that money, you go, wait a second, $16 million? Let me find out a little bit more about this. If he didn't do any of that, then Shohei Ohtani is nowhere near as smart as I think he may even be.
Yeah, there's just a whole lot of holes in this whole story. And how do we know that the interpreter impersonated Shohei Ohtani on the phone. How do we know it wasn't Shohei Ohtani on the phone? I mean, was there video phone evidence of this?
Unless,
I mean,
if the guy spoke English and Shohei doesn't speak English, that's the only way you would know. And even then, you may not, because maybe Shohei does speak English and he's just really, really committed to this cover-up.
Well, and Shohei does speak some English. He can speak some English. He's not, I mean, like so many of the athletes, they're not comfortable with the media, and so they throw the interpreter out there, but he can speak some English. So, I don't know that I totally buy that either. There's just a lot of holes in this whole thing. And, the other thing is, yeah, you can place a lot of bets on your phone, but I'm not sure that's the way this was done, because this was an old school mob type bookie. I mean, this isn't like a casino he's calling up. We're calling up a bookie who may come break your arms if things aren't getting paid off. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And I told you this, the thing that I find the most interesting and makes me believe that Shohei knew something is the fact that the day the story broke, there's a text from the interpreter to the bookie asking him if he's heard that the story broke. And the bookie says, yeah, I know. It's all BS that Shohei didn't know. And that you stole from him. And the guy's like, well, no, technically I stole from him. So it's all over for me. If you've lied to this guy for all these years, are you really going to send him a text message on the day that the story breaks and go, yep, nope, I lied. I'm done. I'm sorry. You want to talk about the perfect fall guy and the perfect cover story for a fall guy going, see, look, we have a text right here that says that he admitted it. We need to be checking, like I told you before we went on the show, we need to be checking the interpreter's bank account in a couple of months to see. I bet you there's more than $16 million in his bank account when he comes out of jail.
Well, not only that, I mean, just the fact that the day everything broke, the amount of times that the story changed on that day alone raises a ton of questions. And I'm not one to question love. I'm not one to question anything that goes on in someone's private life, but it's also really interesting that Shohei said he was married just a couple of days before the start of the regular season as well. And to someone that, from what we understand, they were never really seen together in public, or they did a really good job of hiding it. Again, is that another piece of a deflection story in a sense? And if it isn't, I hope, wish nothing but the best for them in their future. But again, that's another piece that you maybe have to start connecting is, was that announcement made to kind of throw some stuff off? Or is it just a happy coincidence that it was announced before the regular season started and then boom, all of a sudden this comes down? And there's so many moving pieces to it that I don't think, and you said it before we went on too, I don't think we're ever going to know the full story.
No, I don't think we will. But Shohei's definitely taken some hits in the PR department. And then on top of all that, you have the story about his first home run ball that the fan catches that's worth $100,000, and the Dodger security separates the woman from her husband and won't let her talk to him, and says they won't get the ball authenticated if she doesn't agree to hand it over and just take a couple of signed bats and a T-shirt. I mean, if you're the Dodgers and you're Shohei, you're already not looking good in the court of public opinion. A story like this, and then you hear rumors that he's got his own people that he works with. He's kind of separate from the rest of the ball club. He does things his way. Shohei's not taking a great public relations tour in the early days with the Dodgers. He's really looking pretty bad in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, he really is. And, lots more of this story is going to be coming out, I'm sure, as the investigation continues and maybe a trial, who knows. There's going to be a lot of eyes on this. And for Ohtani and the Dodgers, that's not what you wanted the eyes to be looking at when this season started. You wanted them to be looking at the shiny new toy and the final piece of another championship run puzzle and just so many other pieces of it, that this is not what you want to be focusing on as the season goes. And it's going to be real interesting to see how the team and the organization deal with it as the season goes on. So, but again, it's still super early in the year, still plenty of stuff to have happen. And we'll continue to check in and week out on the ins and outs of, the Cardinals and Major League Baseball. But there's, again, still plenty of stuff to talk about locally and nationally. Let's pop over to the Blues real quick in the NHL season as the playoffs are inching ever closer. And a week after we were on, the Blues somehow are still mathematically alive for the final playoff spot in the Western Conference. It's the last spot available in the West, and it's down to them and Vegas and LA in a sense. And Vegas, LA are kind of 1-2. They're one of those teams is going to make the playoffs. The other one is going to have to battle the Blues for this. But unbelievable that with 3 games left, the Blues are still 3 points out of a playoff spot, but it's a very razor thin option for them to get in. They trail Vegas, who has a game in hand, and both schedules for these teams are not looking so great for the Blues to make the playoffs, which may not be a bad thing, but if they do get in, I'm sure they're a team that some players don't want to face, I would think.
Well, right. Yeah. Because, basically they've been playing the playoffs for a month now. I said last week that, I thought they'd get in and get destroyed, but the more I thought about it, a lot of times teams like this that have to fight and claw and scratch to the very last second to get in the playoffs are the ones that go on the run and that you never saw coming, and they end up winning a cup. And not that I'm saying that if the Blues get in the playoffs, they're going to win the cup, but never say never, because that's kind of what happens when you have to play do or die games for a long stretch of time just to get in. And I was thinking about, while we were talking about this, the Blues are teasing fans. It kind of reminds me of the old State Farm commercial with the fisherman with the dollar bill on his reel and the woman reaches, you almost got it. That's kind of what the Blues are doing to the fan base right now for the last couple of weeks. But, if they can get in, at this point you have to say, with the goalie work that we've seen from Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer and the way some of these young kids have stepped up, you just never know.
Yeah, you really don't. And even if you do get into the playoffs and maybe get knocked out in the first round again, it's more playoff experience for those youngsters, like a Zach Bolduc, like a Jake Neighbors. Give them that opportunity to see what playoff hockey is like, so that they know what they need to do to continue to get to that point and then progress forward from there. It's going to be tough, though. Blues have 3 games left. They have 2 home games against Carolina and Seattle, and then they're on the road against Dallas to finish off the regular season. For Vegas, they got Minnesota, who's now technically eliminated from the playoffs. They've got Colorado, who's still fighting for a chance at taking the number 1 spot in the Central against Dallas. But then you got Chicago and Anaheim. All 4 of those games for Vegas are at home. So it's not that difficult for them to knock out a couple wins and secure this spot, because looking at the way things shake out, Blues are going to need to basically win out and gain all 6 points. That'll put them at 95. Vegas can only collect 2 points in those final 4 games, or else the Blues are eliminated, because they hold the tie-breaking edge. So, yeah, you could sit there and go, yeah, maybe Minnesota has something to prove. They just got knocked out of the playoffs. Yeah, they'll play Vegas tough. Maybe they'll beat them. Colorado, they're fighting for the number 1 spot in the Central. Yeah, that's going to be a tough game. Maybe they beat them. But then you got Chicago, who we just beat last night, scored our first 4 goals on our first 4 shots. They're probably going to get beat by Vegas. And then you also have Anaheim, who, yes, maybe they could put up a fight and surprise them. Who knows? But again, with Vegas being at home, the likelihood of them winning 2 of their final 4 games is very, very high. So, yes, keep the faith as long as you possibly can, Blues fans. Not really going to blame you for continuing to root for them. I think it's great if they find a way to make the playoffs. That's awesome. But don't go off the edge if they do lose. I'm looking at you, Blues fan reacts. I'm looking at you, Mason. Do not jump off the ledge if the Blues don't make the playoffs. Because I already know you're on there with the Arizona to Utah thing. But don't jump off the edge, okay? It'd be exciting if they make it in, but the likelihood is very, very, very small.
Yeah, definitely. But like we said, anything could happen, and you just gotta. They're keeping Blues fans on the edge of their seat, man, which is what you want to do. You want to keep your fan base engaged, and they've definitely done that.
That they have, and they've actually their guys that needed to get hot have started to get hot as well, and that's something you like to see as well. Sometimes at this point, some of these star players pack it in. They go, man, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. We're just gonna whatever. We'll just go out there and play. Robert Thomas, 9 points in his last 4 games. He had his 3rd straight multi-point game last night. He's at 83 points on the year. He's the first point per game player since Tarasenko back in 21-22. Tarasenko had 82 points in 75 games. Thomas has 83 and 79. He still has, obviously, 3 more games to collect some more points. He's 10 behind Pavel Demitra for most in a season by a blue. I don't think he's going to catch him, because that'd be a lot of points. He'd have to put up 11 points in his last 3 games, which is very, very unlikely. Who knows? Could happen. very well possibly can't. But he has played well. Jordan Kyrie's on a 4-game point streak, 4 goals, 3 assists. Pavel Buchnevich, a 4-game point streak, a goal and 3 assists. He notched his 400th career point last night with an assist. So you got guys that are playing well right now. Again, the crux comes back to the defensive side of things. And, Colton Parayko has been great this year. I know people were really down on him for a long time, and I think people still are down on him. They probably want him traded in the offseason, but I think he's going to be a stalwart there. I like, and I know people probably lambast me for this, I like what Scott Perunovich has done this year. Yes, he hasn't scored a goal. Yes, he hasn't been flawless when it comes to defense, but he's done what he needs to do. He's picked up a bunch of assists. He's done a nice job working with the power play and kind of making that relevant again. I really like what I've seen from him. He's a restricted free agent, so we don't even know if he's going to be back next year. That's going to be an interesting thing. Torrey Krug's been hurt a bunch this year, but he had a decent season. Justin Falk kind of took a step back this year in my mind. He's also dealt with some injuries as well. So the big thing for the Blues going into the offseason, whether it's at the end of the regular season after a postseason run, they got to find a way to really get the salary cap back in their favor and find a way to kind of revamp that defensive core going into next season, because I think the future offensively and in net is very, very bright for this team. Now they just need to find a way to make sure that the defense can match that so that they can continue to grow and be a threat in the Central Division.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think Perunovich, the biggest thing for him is that he's been healthy all year, which is one of the biggest things the Blues needed to see, because that's something, he just hadn't been able to stay on the ice. With all the hype around him the last couple of years for him, like you said, he hasn't scored a goal, done a whole lot offensively, had some assists. But the big thing is, that he's really played well and gotten himself on the ice and has really played well with Colton Parayko recently, which is nice to see. A lot of people were talking, I've heard a lot of people talking, that could be your number one pairing defensively next year potentially. Which I see I kind of see that you're not thrilled with that idea just by your facial expression.
Not that I'm not thrilled. I just don't think that that Perunovich is the right guy to pair with a Parayko. I like someone that can be, and I know that it's a shame that we ended up losing him, but I like what he had with Jay Bouwmeester. Bouwmeester was kind of a defensive-minded guy. Parayko is a defensive-minded guy, but it allowed him to be a little bit more freer offensively, leading the rush. He's done a lot of that this year as well, and I think that's why he worked so well with Marco Scandella. I think he's had an underratedly decent year as well this year. So I'd be fine if Scandella was here next year and they paired him with Parayko again. I think that's okay. I think Perunovich is definitely a second pairing defender. He is a smaller defender, and that's the thing. You're not going to put a guy like that against some of these top line guys. The only thing that he can really do is match speed with a McDavid or a Draisaitl or that type of player, which is the only reason you would even put him in that first defensive pairing. But I think in those instances, Parayko is the guy that is on those guys. So I feel like if you were to put Perunovich on that number one pairing, it'd actually be a bit of a detriment to the defense and to Perunovich. I think you put him as a second pairing defender and put him with a guy that, is a little bit more defensive minded and not inclined to go offensively. And then all of a sudden you've got two pairings with a Parayko and a Scandella and a Perunovich and whoever he's with, where it's the ability to go up offensively is there, but the defensive mindset is still there as well. So I don't think he is a first pairing defender. I could be wrong. Who knows? But I just don't see that being the case next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, going to grow and see how that all plays out. One question I got to ask you, we were talking about things that the Blues could potentially do in the offseason, and I heard this name come up, and I was like, that's interesting, and you might already know where I'm going. I don't know.
Possibly.
But we heard his brother's name linked to the Blues a whole lot last year. There's all of a sudden a whole lot of Brady Tkachuk to St. Louis, at least being whispered in the background, the possibility of him coming here. Do you think Brady could come here and be that 40-goal scorer that the Blues kind of need? They've got a bunch of guys that can score 25 to 30. Could he be that guy? Or do you think he could potentially be that? And the second question is, would he want to come to St. Louis? Or would it be kind of like Matthew and him be like, yeah, you know what? The pressure of following in my dad's footsteps in St. Louis and being the local kid and all the hype, maybe I don't want to deal with that. Maybe I want to play with somebody else. What do you think?
I'll answer your second question first. I think he would want to play here. I really do. I think because of the relationships that have been built here, and I think Matthew wanted to play here as well. And maybe that wasn't what was said in the media, but I think he did want to play here. I just think it just didn't fit in the moment for him. I think he saw that this team probably wasn't a Stanley Cup contender for the next couple of years, and I think he saw in Florida that they very well could be, and they very well could be a Stanley Cup contender this year. So, and then the whole salary. Sales tax freedom of Florida definitely helps as well. But I think Brady.
Sorry, and there was the lore for Matthew being a guy in your 20s living in South Beach. I mean, you can't really blame him for that one.
Yeah, can't either. But for Brady, yeah, I think he would want to play here. I really do. I think he can be a 40-goal scorer here. I think he has that style of play. I think he would fit in very, very well here. The real question comes down to, well, it's two questions really. It's A, who would you have to give up in order to get him? Would you have to trade a Jake Neighbors? Would you have to trade a Zach Bolduc? Who would have to go to Ottawa in order to bring a Brady Tkachuk here? And two, if that's the case, can we fleece Ottawa once more? Because we mentioned his name a little while ago. Pavel Demitra was a guy that we brought in from Ottawa that had a great career here in St. Louis. And yes, he wasn't actually an Ottawa Senator, but the pick that we traded to Ottawa became a Vladimir Tarasenko. So, does Ottawa want to work with us one more time and run that risk? I don't know. It's going to take a pretty good package to bring a guy like Brady Tkachuk here, but I could very well see him playing here and putting up 40 goals. I mean, you put him up, if you put him on a line with a Robert Thomas and a Pavel Buchnevich, that could be a very deadly line because you see what it is right now with Jake Neighbors. And I love Jake Neighbors' style of play. He's a hard nose. He is Keith Tkachuk, just a little bit skinnier right now, but he's a net front presence. He goes to the dirty areas. He really agitates people in front of the net. He is exactly what you want there. And if they find a way to keep him and bring in a guy like Tkachuk, all of a sudden you've got guys that can play on the first two lines that are pests in front of the net. That makes this team so much better. The problem is, I feel like if you're going to make that deal, Ottawa's going to want a Jake Neighbors to come in and replace a Brady Tkachuk. But who knows? Maybe Doug Armstrong can work his magic once again and find a way to just absolutely fleece another team for a star player.
Would you throw Jordan Kyrou in that package instead of a Jake Neighbors and see if he could make something like that work?
Oh, man. A couple months ago, I would say in a heartbeat, but he has grown this year. He started to really put it together a little bit defensively. There are still moments where he does kind of coast a little bit. Offensively, he's really shown that he can score when needed. It would be a tough sell for me, but I feel like if you were able to keep a Jake Neighbors and a Zach Bolduc and an Alexei Toropchenko, and Kyrou is the guy that it's built around to bring in a Brady Tkachuk, I think you can pull the trigger on that one and be okay. I'm not trying to run him out of town, but I feel like if that's the deal that can be made, I think it does help. I think you can make that deal.
Yeah, I just wonder, Jordan Kyrou, and like you said, he has played better, but he's just going to be the whipping boy in St. Louis. Yeah. I feel like for him to ever really fully hit his full potential, he may have to do it somewhere else besides St. Louis, because I feel like anytime anything goes wrong, he's going to be the guy that people point their finger at and say, that's the reason. Kind of like a Jay Bouwmeester was for a long time. But then before he became beloved at the end of his run there. But, Jay Bouwmeester was the problem for everything for a long time.
Well, at least Bouwmeester had an excuse. He ended up having surgery and then getting himself healthy, right. And that's what allowed him to really get back to the style of play that he was able to have early in his career. Kyrou doesn't have that excuse. He doesn't have a lingering injury that is detrimental to his game, because we see that he can turn on the jets. We see that he has the stick handling. He has all of that. It's really all up here in between the ears. And I think he has worked himself very well into figuring it out and becoming a more complete player. It's the same thing with what we saw with Tarasenko. Tarasenko early in his career was all about the goal scoring. He was worried about offense, wasn't worried about anything else. By the time he left here, he was the most well-rounded forward on this team. He was out there on the penalty kill. If you would have told me first couple years of Tarasenko's career here in St. Louis that he would eventually be a guy that was relied on heavily on the penalty kill, people would have looked at you stupid. But he grew into that. But he also had coaches that allowed him to learn and teach him how to be into that mode. I don't know what direction this team is going to go when it comes to coaches next year. So who knows? Maybe it's going to be a fresh start that a guy like Kyrie would need to go somewhere else, because who knows who's going to be coaching this team next year. It could be a detriment to him to stick around. So lots of different moving pieces that go into this. And, if this team stays offensively the same next year, I'm okay. It's defense that we really have to make sure we figure out going into next year. And again, it's all going to rely on who's the coach next year.
Talking about that real quick. Do you
think
I
know where you're going.
Do you think Drew Bannister is the guy? Because even though the fact that we've got all these young kids that he's coached through the minors and he knows these guys well, do you think, I know you just said no, but I kind of think maybe you keep him for one more year, because it's going to be hard for them to make the playoffs again next year. I think you've got another year before you're really back in serious playoff contention. So maybe you keep him for one more year, kind of let him grow with him, kind of bring some of these guys, kind of let him nurture them, get him started. And then when the team is advanced a little bit farther, is a little bit closer to being a serious playoff contender, then you go out and get that next really legitimate coach. What do you think?
I can see the argument in that. And the more reason why I can see the argument of that is I don't know if there is a next hot coach that's coming up that, you would want to grab. I mean, we've seen it all across the NHL, the amount of recycled head coaches that are out there. It's staggering. I mean, you just don't see many young up and coming new coaches that are getting opportunities. And I'm not just going to sit there and say Drew Bannister is an old coach, but he isn't one of those exciting young new guys that you want to have be the guy that coaches this team for the next handful of years. If there was a guy that, you could look down at the AHL and say, or maybe a collegiate coach that you're like, yeah, in about 2 years, this guy is going to be something. Totally can understand them sticking with a guy like Bannister and developing this team going forward. I just don't see who the next guy is in the coaching realm that is going to be an exciting move. So unfortunately, I think the Blues are going to rehash somebody. I think they're going to find someone that is established in the league, and that's going to be the guy that moves forward with this team. There's a lot of people that are pushing for a guy. He was in town this past weekend for the puck cancer game for Kelly Chase. Great game. We raised over $1 million between the Blues and the game to help fight cancer, V Foundation and the Siteman Cancer Center. Excellent thing. I can't believe we haven't done something like this sooner. But it was awesome. It was a great event. Joel Quenneville was in town. He was on Andy Strickland's podcast. Everybody's like, ooh, look at this. This is the precursor. This is going to happen. He's still technically banned by the NHL. He's not able to coach. Do the Blues want to touch that with a 10-foot pole? I don't think so. Does Doug Armstrong want to have to deal with that? Probably not. Would it really stick in the craw of Chicago? Hell yes. Because, of everything that went down, and to have him be behind the bench again and for a rival, going back to the team that he first started really having success with, all that stuff. Yeah, it would really be a story for sure. I just don't see how Tom Stillman could allow that to happen, in a sense. I think he understands the ramifications around that. And as much as I think a lot of us Blues fans would be very welcoming and excited to have Quenneville come back and potentially reestablish his legacy here with the Blues and maybe eventually find a way to win a cup as a Blues head coach, that would be great. But for everything that went down with his tenure in Chicago, I just don't see how Stillman can rectify that and find a way to get the ban kind of lifted and then to allow him to come in and coach this team. I just don't see it happening. But I could be wrong. Who knows? I mean, crazier things have happened. We've seen crazier coaches get hired. I mean, Patrick Waugh's back in the league, so who knows?
Yeah, see, I'm going to disagree with you. I think that's the one guy. If it's not Bannister, it's because they found a way to get Q reinstated and he comes back. Because I think St. Louis is the one place. I think St. Louis and Blues fans have such fond memories of Joel Quenneville that I think that the whole city would open their arms to him and be like, "Coach Q's back," and everybody would be excited, and we would forget what happened in Chicago, and we would be like, "Yeah, great memories. We're going to build something new, and we're going to stick it to the Blackhawks because that's the place he coached." And everybody's just going to kind of kick that out of their memory, what happened in Chicago, and it'll be a wonderful, happy reunion. I think that's the one person that could come in and Bannister not be the coach. I think that's the only way that it doesn't happen. That's just the way I see it.
See, if it was gambling that was going on in the locker room, if it was something that was I guess morally wrong, if it was something along those lines, yes. But this was sexual assault and a cover up. Right. And I just that for me personally is a hard thing to sweep under the rug, regardless of any success that someone would have. So it's a tough sell for me. It really, really is.
Oh,
so, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. And I understand that if people can set that aside and be like, oh yeah, he's a great coach, this is what we're going to go for, I can totally understand and respect that. For me, it would be a tough sell. I mean, it's not like if Pete Rose were to manage again in Major League Baseball, because sports betting is now legal and it's now a big part of the game. That's one thing. But for me, it's a sexual assault cover up with young people. It's a tough sell. And that's sit there to say the same thing about what Team Canada's going through and the guys that are involved in that scandal right now as well. It'd be a hard sell for me to have one of those guys if they were acquitted, if they were acquitted because there was no evidence, different story. But if they were found guilty or if they were found complicit in anything, it'd be a hard sell for me to say, yeah, you know what, you can sign him. That's all well and done in the past. I believe in second chances. Don't get me wrong, but some of those second chances are harder sells, and in this case, this one would be a really hard sell for me.
No, I totally understand it, and I'm not trying to downplay the allegations and everything that went on either. I think St. Louis is the one place because of the history that people would find a way to overlook. You know how sports fans are.
Oh yeah.
If things go right, they'll forgive just about anything. So unless your name's Trevor Bauer,
very, very true. Very true.
But I agree with you. It would be a hard sell for me too. But I do think that might be the one guy that if they can get, and again, it's going to be hard to get him just cleared to be allowed to coach again. But if he's cleared, and if the league says yes, he can coach again, I could definitely see the Blues making a run at that.
Oh yeah. I think you're right in that as well. So it'd be interesting to see what the mindset is there and how things like that play out. But still, a couple more games left of the season, a potential playoff spot still on the line. So all this talk may be moot for another couple of months, depending on how things go. And we're already almost an hour and a half into this show, so we got to kind of rip through a couple of these other topics so we can get you guys out of here in a decent time tonight. Let's do a quick recap of the NCAA championships and kind of the other news that has dropped, big news that has dropped in the NCAA as well. First off, let's talk about those title games. First off, you had South Carolina completing the perfect season against Caitlin Clark and Iowa. They won 87-75, and that was a heck of a game to watch. And
it was.
I'll be perfectly honest. I very rarely, if ever, have really sat down and watched a women's basketball game. That's on me. But I have been, just like the entire country, heavily invested in this NCAA women's tournament. And the Iowa UConn game and then the Iowa South Carolina game were two of the most enjoyable games I have seen, not just in the women's game, in the last handful of years. And I didn't say best games. I said enjoyable because, yes, there were some issues in both of those games that could have pushed things the other way, but they were still highly enjoyable. And I'm going to go back to what we talked about at the end of the show last week, and I want to get your opinion now that the perfect season is complete and with other things that have kind of been going on in the world of the college basketball game. Is Dawn Staley the coach that you think of when you think of NCAA basketball?
Yeah, she probably is now. I will give you that. Now, after that, she probably is.
Okay, and then what were your thoughts on the title game for the women? I mean,
it like you said, it was an enjoyable game. I'm not sat down and watched a whole lot of women's basketball either until the tournament this year, and I have. And Caitlin Clark caught my attention. I caught little bits and pieces of games during the regular season, but then to watch them and what South Carolina did, it was really good basketball. It was enjoyable, and it was really fun to watch. And you got to give South Carolina credit for winning the NCAA tournament. You got to give Caitlin Clark and Iowa credit for what they did. And if we're going to talk about women's basketball, we got to talk about an area team because the SLU women won the NIT Women's Championship. So lots of credit and great job to the SLU women as well. Got to give them props for that.
Yeah, and being friends with Colin Surrey, the guy who does most of all of their broadcasts for SLU Billikens Radio, to kind of talk with him throughout the season and get an insight into what these women have done and how they've kind of come together and really pushed to have them and see them go on this run is absolutely incredible. And it was great because not only that, they had to play that game at SIUE. It wasn't even a home game for them. They had to play at SIUE because something was already scheduled at Chaffetz for the night that was going to happen. So credit to them for going on the road and winning that game and winning it in convincing fashion as well. A huge congratulations to the SLU women. And, the SLU men are also big in the news right now as they got their guy after they moved on from Travis Ford. They picked up Josh Schertz from Indiana State. He led the Sycamores to their first 30-win season, a Missouri Valley championship, and an NIT championship game. So they got a guy that they feel like can really put this program into the next era, and he's a Rick Majerus guy.
Yes. And, that tells you a lot right there because there wasn't much of a better coach or a classier man than Coach Majerus. So anybody that follows in his footsteps, that's a good sign. And it looks like some of his kids are going to follow him to SLU, as it looks like his leading scorer from Indiana State, the goggled wonder, may be making his way to St. Louis.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
Yeah. Yep. It's looking that way because they said that he entered the transfer portal, but they said he had a red check mark that he didn't want coaches to contact him, which usually means that he already has a school in mind. So most people are linking him to SLU. So that would be a nice get to have your first player come that's a 17-point guy. That would be a good step in the right direction.
Well, it came out, I believe, that every player on Indiana State is going to enter the transfer portal as well. So, whether they're all coming to SLU, which is highly doubtful, or they're moving on to other organizations in college, you could tell that they came together, they had a heck of a season, and now they're either getting interest from other schools to join their programs, or they're going to be following their head coach to SLU. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch as this goes on. And, it's going to be hard for Schertz there as well, because he is starting a little bit later than a lot of coaches, because he did make that run to the NIT championship game. He's going to have trouble. Another guy that's going to have trouble, but not so much because he's got a whole lot of NIL money behind him now, and that's John Calipari. Did you even expect the announcement that he was leaving Kentucky for Arkansas to ever enter your mind as a headline you'd ever see?
No, because when in the world is anybody ever going to leave Kentucky to go to Arkansas? Not that Arkansas has not had a good basketball program over the years, but I mean, when you talk about the blue bloods in college basketball, Kentucky's at the very, very top of the mountain. So, no, it was a huge shock. But again, like you said, the NIL money, and it sounds like some of the boosters in the Arkansas athletic program had a lot to do with it. Apparently, a man that we know very well down in Dallas named Jerry Jones, who's one of the biggest donators to the Arkansas athletic program, had a lot to do with this. Apparently, threw in a whole bunch of money. And
so did the Tyson Chicken guy.
Apparently, Walmart threw in even some more money. It's not enough that they have the
another reason to hate
named
Kroenke
after Walmart. But yeah, they've got some big money people in Arkansas, and apparently they've decided to step up. And it's got some people scared in Columbia, Missouri, too, because the Arkansas football program is trying to build and maybe looking to make a splash with their next head football coach. And a certain coach in Columbia is an Arkansas native. I don't think he will leave to go to Arkansas. I think he's pretty happy with what he's got in the NIL money he's got in Columbia. But there are some people that are a little nervous that Arkansas may make a run at Eli Drinkwitz in the next couple of years. So just throwing that in there real quick. But yes, the fact that Calipari went to Arkansas shocked me. My first thought when I first heard it was, okay, he must have thought he was going to get the hammer in Kentucky, that Kentucky was had enough and he was going to lose his job. And maybe that's still the case, although I think he got a whole lot of money and a lot of NIL money, a lot of salary, and probably free reign to do whatever he wants in Arkansas. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Kentucky does now.
Yeah, because Dan Hurley's already said no. Nate Oates has said no. Scott Drew just said no today. Billy Donovan's kind of distanced himself from the coaching search, although that's because he's still kind of in season. The Bulls have a play-in game coming up next week. So that name could be someone that cycles back here in the next couple of weeks as being a guy that could go to Kentucky. There's other names out there. Shaka Smart, Mark Pope, Bruce Pearl, Sean Miller, all names that are out there. And then there's one under the radar coach that has been thrown out there that I would be very upset if he did make that move, and that's Brad Underwood over at Illinois. There's a lot of people that say that it's a possibility they may target him for what he's done to kind of revamp that Illinois program. Obviously, they had a great year this year. I don't think he'd look all that great in Kentucky blue, but I don't know. What do you think?
I've heard that rumor. I'm going to tell you that I have some family. I have a bunch of family that lives in Lexington that are big-time, diehard Kentucky fans that went to Kentucky. And here's a name for you that is floating around Kentucky circles, and it's somebody that Kentucky Wildcat fans know really well. He's a New York guy. He's got slick back hair, and he may be at St. John's right now, but there is a whole lot of at least whispers that they may make a run at bringing Rick Pitino back to Lexington.
Now that would be a way to steal the thunder from Calipari to Arkansas.
It would, wouldn't it? And I'm a huge Pitino. I mean, I know he's done some things that haven't been great, but I'm a huge Rick Pitino fan. I'd love to see him back in Kentucky.
What about his son?
And that's the other thing is that, Pitino goes there, and then in a couple of years he grooms his son to take over, and then he's the long-term answer in Kentucky. That's the whispers from some people that are down there that they're at least hearing. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and I can see that happening. I don't think there's very many places that Pitino would leave St. John's for, because he's talked about being so happy to be back on the East Coast, being a New Yorker, obviously. But I think if he got that call to go back to Lexington, I think that's the one place that he may go back to for a shot at another championship and to kind of redeem himself in Lexington.
So a dark horse candidate. It's definitely something to watch as the offseason progresses. And the offseason is in full swing because UConn went back-to-back, defeated Purdue 75-60 in the title game. There were a couple moments in that game, too, that kind of made you go, I don't know if you saw the Dan Hurley push of one of his players. Well, that was on the court, and just a couple other things. The conversation he had with Eddie as he basically came all the way onto the court during a timeout or leading into a timeout. Just a couple of instances that just kind of made you go, this is interesting. So what did you think when you saw those moments? Because I was kind of like, this guy's getting away with a little bit.
He was. Yeah, they definitely gave him some leeway, and he took advantage of it. But you got to give him credit, man. He's done a heck of a coaching job the last 2 years. We talked about last week that he comes from quite a basketball coaching tree and talent tree, with his dad being a high school coach, and then him and his brother, of course, the success they had in college, and now both of them being coaches. So there's quite a lineage in that family, and he's done an amazing job.
That he has, and they are back-to-back champions, so we'll see if they can go for a three-peat next year. Going to be a lot of challengers for that for next season. All right, Masters began today after a rain-delayed opening. Bryson DeChambeau is currently leading at 7 under. Everybody kind of got off to the late start today. Rory McIlroy, probably one of the favorites, finished up today at -1. Tiger Woods was at -1 last time I checked. He was still out on the course when we went on, which is crazy to sit there and think about that these guys are still on the courses at that point. But taking a quick look at the updated score sheet, there's still technically, I guess, still guys out on the course unless they've shut them down for the day due to nighttime falling. But DeChambeau still leading at 7 under. Scotty Scheffler sitting at 6 under. You've got Tiger Woods, he's at -1. They still got to list this on the 13th hole. My guess, though, is that they have shut down play for the remainder of the day and probably going to get them out there a little bit early to finish up. Brooks Koepka is sitting at even par. Phil Mickelson, last I checked, was at +1. So, looking at all those kind of guys, it's a couple of guys up at the top and then a whole bunch of guys kind of right in the middle. But honestly, when you watch the Masters, first couple of days are like that. You're going to have a guy or two that's going to really run out there. And then by the time the weekend rolls around, everybody kind of comes back to the pack. And then somebody out of the blue finds a way to win the championship. My question to you is, do you think Tiger has a shot?
It's the Masters and it's Tiger. He's always got a shot, man. Most tournaments at this point you say no, but it's Tiger. It's Tiger and the Masters. You just kind of expect a little magic on Sunday, don't you?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And this is his first tournament with the new apparel line as well. So when it gets to Sunday, if he's in contention, be interested to see what he's going to pull out as far as the polo that he's going to wear for Sunday. So, just officially here, first round is going to resume on Friday at 7:50 Eastern, so 6:50. So group's still on the first course. That when the play was suspended, there's a whole bunch of them. Looks like there's about 10 groups that are going to have to finish up before the second round gets underway. Tiger Woods is part of that, as well as Dustin Johnson and Jordan Spieth, as well as Brooks Koepka too. So a lot of guys need to finish up the first round before moving into the second round later in the afternoon. This has been a very interesting time for golf. Obviously, with the LIV group coming in and all the things that went on around that. Are we, I wouldn't say out of the golden age of golf that we had over the last 20 years, but are we at a precipice where things could go south quickly for the game of golf, especially once Tiger kind of exits the picture, once Phil kind of exits the picture? Do we have that next grouping of guys that can really get you excited about the game of golf?
I don't know. There's some really good players, but I don't know that there's that excitement level that you had. I mean, we've seen golf the popularity kind of go down the last couple of years just because Tiger hasn't been so prevalent. And, with Liv and Phil and all the drama with the Saudis and everything else, that's kind of taken away some of the luster from Phil Mickelson at this point. Plus, he hasn't played all that great for the last couple of years either. And you do have a bunch of guys that are really talented players, but some of the names, but there's just, I don't know that any of them are that must-see guy that Tiger was or that Phil was in their prime.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. I mean, golf is always better when there's a couple of guys that are just targets and that really get you talking about the game. And that's not to sit there and say there aren't really good golfers that are still coming up through the ranks that could win a lot of tournaments. But the name recognition, the explosiveness isn't necessarily there. I don't catch myself on Sundays popping on, the final round of a tournament just to see who's got a chance and stick with it for a little while. I'm not anymore. And it's kind of sad because I thought maybe, with the excitement that a Jordan Spieth was bringing for a little while there, what Koepka was bringing for a little while there was going to be enough to kind of lead into the next generation. But then with the whole LIV golf thing, it kind of splintered and it kind of pushed a couple of guys into a couple of different areas that maybe they didn't want to be in. And it could have been setting up for a really, really cool, like wrestling good guy, bad guy kind of thing. You could have had that villain in a sense, but it just never really kind of panned out that way. And now that, PGA and LIV have kind of joined forces now in a sense for some of these things, it doesn't feel right. And now you don't really know who's someone you can root for because the lines have been blurred.
Yeah, it's really confusing. You don't know who's where and who's doing what, and and there's not, and like you said, there's not that guy that no matter what's going on is going to draw you to you. Guys like Rory and Dustin Johnson, and those guys were supposed to be the next guys, and they've done well, but they've just never really been able to reach that level, that next level, to really draw people in to stop what they're doing to watch them, and that's what golf really needs. They need that guy like Tiger was, that when it was Sunday and the Masters were on, you stopped what you were doing to see what Tiger was doing. And, in past years, Jack Nicholson Jack Nicklaus. Watching Jack Nicholson play golf on Sunday would have been fun too. Yeah, Jack Nicholson, or Arnold Palmer and those guys. There's just not that name recognition right now where you're just like, oh man, I gotta see this guy, see what he does. And hopefully they can develop some of those guys at some point. But like you said, it's just really confusing with the whole live thing. And yeah, I'm just I've kind of lost interest in golf. I'll check out the Masters on Sunday, but right now it's not that draw for me that it was a couple of years ago.
Only reason I'll turn a golf match on is if I see Dustin Johnson near the top of the leaderboard so I can get a glimpse of Paulina and be fine with the rest of my day. That's about the only reason. And you know what? There is potentially a up-and-coming golfer that in the next handful of years we may see making an impact, and that's my buddy Paulo's son, Maverick, who is doing some really cool things here locally, been traveling across the country in some golf tournaments as well. Keep an eye out for Maverick. That might be somebody in the next 10 years that all of a sudden you go, oh, hey, who's this kid? Well, hey, I knew him because I watched him grow up. So maybe some excitement for golf here in the near future. One last piece of info, and I know it's kind of bad that we're waiting this long to talk about them because, they are a local team and they did bring so much excitement to us last year, but it's just kind of been blah this year, kind of on the back burner, and that's City SC. They're hosting Austin on Sunday. They come into the game 1-1-5, 1 win, 1 loss, 5 draws for 8 points. It puts them outside of the playoff picture. Again, just like baseball, it's really early in the season, so this doesn't matter in a sense right now, but nowhere near where they were at last year. They're hosting Austin, who's 2-2-3 with 9 points on Sunday. This is the team I think most people thought we'd see last year, in a sense, to where they're competing and maybe they're collecting a lot of draws and a lot of 1 points, but not really kind of getting over the hump. Last year was an explosive debut, and now that they've kind of dropped back to where we thought they were going to be, it's a little disappointing. But again, they've dealt with injuries. Leuven's still out. Klaus and Adinarin just haven't really been clicking a whole lot to start this season. I don't know. Maybe they're missing Gioacchini. That might be something that you look back on and you go, man. But the fact that you were able to send a guy out on a transfer and get the feedback after just 1 year, it really does put your team on the map. It's going to be interesting to see if they do make any moves during the summer transfer window, because there are a couple of guys in Europe that might actually make their way over here. And because of connections that this team has with some of these players, you might see a guy come over that maybe you didn't expect. It's gonna be a real interesting time for City SC this summer, because the expectations after last year were so high that, again, because we're spoiled here, we expect them to win a bunch of games, and when they don't, it's a little frustrating.
Yeah, and like you said, the best word to describe it so far has just been blah. I've tried to watch a couple of games, and I'm like, hate to say it, but watching it on TV, it's like, this is kind of dull. And I flipped, and there's just not a whole lot of hype around them this year because they haven't been real exciting, which is kind of sad to say in just their second year, that it's kind of like, they're kind of become an afterthought. And I think part of that, and we talked about this last year, is the fact that there's not that, they're not on mainstream television. They're not right there where you find them right away. A lot of people, if you don't have Apple TV and you're not watching the news, there's a lot of people that probably don't even realize that they're playing, because there just hasn't been that hype around them this year. It's like, oh, the soccer team's playing? Really? Huh? Really? What are they doing? Oh, they've tied a bunch of games. And there's just, I don't know. I know that the hardcore soccer fans are still really excited, and I know it's an amazing event to be at the stadium, but I'm not sure that, there's just not the same excitement overall that there was last year, because it's just been kind of blah. And it's like we talked about last week. They're where we thought they were going to be last year. They're a okay team. They're not a great team. They're not a super exciting team. They're a hardworking team. They're a middle of the pack type team, honestly, and that's kind of what you would expect a second-year expansion team to be. We just got a little bit spoiled last year, like you said. There was that they took off way faster than anybody thought they were going to, and now they've kind of come back to earth, and everybody's like, I don't know.
They're a perennially St. Louis team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to describe it.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's a blue-collar kind of team, and they play as a team, not with the star, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, and you just kind of have to live with the results of all of that. And yeah, I think you're 100% right about the fact that not being on mainstream television, and on the other side of it, well, there's actually two other pieces that kind of it hurts the casual fan because the majority of all the games are played at the same time. So even, you don't have that midweek MLS game of the week that you can pop on and get excited about maybe seeing an opponent that you're going to see later on this week for St. Louis. If you're, watching the St. Louis game, you're not watching any of the other games that are going on because they're all going on at the same time. So the structure of the MLS games is a little bit harder for casual fans and for diehard fans as well. And also for diehard fans, it's just, I don't know. Oh man, I had it and I lost it, and I cannot remember what I was going to say about the hardcore fans that I was going to make my point with. But it's just one of those things that, the Open Cup debacle with MLS kind of distancing themselves from the longest running tournament, and the one where you saw so much just community involvement because you saw these lower tier clubs going up against MLS squads, going up against some of the best in Mexico and all of that you just don't have that. And a lot of the hardcore fans now are kind of distancing themselves from the MLS because of that. And that's another thing that could potentially hurt City as well, because the casual fans, you were going to either have them or not have them. But if you start, not through their own fault, but because of the league, if you start to lose those hardcore fans, that's going to make things a struggle as well.
Yeah, that you've got a real problem if you start losing the hardcore fans. So yeah, they got to figure that out, and just hope things go well for them. There's still a long season to go because we know soccer season is a long season. So lots of time for them to get things going.
Yep, 100%. So, all right, well, we've probably talked your ears off for quite longer than you probably wanted us to. But Scott, you got anything else before we head out today?
Two quick things, and both of them go to the west side of the state. First of all, shout out to the Royals and Royals fans. So they won their 7th game in a row today. So Kansas City on a roll. The Royals are now 10-4. The second bit of news for our fans on the west side, not so great. For you Chiefs fans, you might want to tune this out if you haven't heard it right. Rashee Rice, 8 felony count charges against him now, facing up to potentially 30 years in prison. He said he was going to accept all the consequences and face the charges. He is yet to turn himself in, which he said he was going to do. Please say if he doesn't in the next couple of days. They're coming to get him. I would think it's probably safe to say that his NFL career, as bright as it looked, is probably over.
Yeah, I would have to agree 100% with that. And, he may have said that he was going to accept all the consequences, but his lawyers may be one of the ones that potentially are preventing him from turning him in just at this point. So that's definitely a story to bear watching. And again, this just goes back to these young athletes that are getting a ton of money and a ton of publicity and not having the people around them to help guide them in the right direction.
Yep.
And this is not just the young guys as well. I mean, we see this throughout sports, not just with the athletes, but with, we saw it here even locally with Danny Mac in a sense that, alcoholism is a disease. It's something that needs to be combated on a daily basis. And when you have people in these positions that can affect other people's lives, and you as an owner or you as a leader in an organization that sees what's going on and doesn't protect these people from hurting themselves and hurting others, it again makes me question why things are the way they are, because there's money available to provide rides. There's money available to have guys go and learn the ins and outs of things. We see all these guys, these kids coming out of college that are getting millions of dollars and blowing it all because they don't know money management. We have them doing things because they don't have anybody that's sitting there telling them no. We have all of this stuff happening and we see it all in front of our eyes, and we're complicit in it as well because,
Absolutely.
we don't talk about it enough. But, at some points, somebody has to put the foot down and say, look, we got to make it to where these people are getting the support that they need early on so that when they get older, they're still able to live a life. Because Rashee Rice, if he goes to jail for 30 years, he's not living a life. And that's a big, big problem. And it's just adding to the degradation of the country when you have a lot of these younger people that are essentially ruining their lives, and no one's there to help pick them up and show them the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and it comes down to, again, as much as we love to praise athletes, and so many of them do a great thing, you get these 19, 20-year-old kids that are great athletes, and they're pretty much given everything as far as, there's really not told no, because they're super talented athletes. They're allowed to get away with whatever, and then they get all of this money, and like you said, they have the wrong people around them, and things like this happen. And it's a tragic situation, because you hate to see a 20-year-old kid who had such a bright future thrown away in such a dumb mistake as racing cars and causing an accident. And he knew he screwed up, because he obviously fled the scene of the accident, and unfortunately, I guess he thought he was going to get away with it. But when you leave your cars there at the scene, and there's traffic cameras,
and they're registered in your name.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to get away with. So that's a bad thing, but I don't want to end the show on a negative and talking about all the bad things with young athletes. We've also got to throw a congratulations out, and I'm actually rocking my Orioles hat and watching the game in the background. Got to say congratulations to Jackson Holliday, who made it to the major leagues this year. And we've also got to say congratulations to friends of ours who joined if you watched our former show, have joined us in the past. We got to say congratulations to his mom and dad, Matt and Leslie, who did a great job raising him by all accounts. Jackson is a professional already at 21 years old, and everybody that has seen him and been around him says that he handles it like a pro. And so hope for great things for him. And there's more holidays coming, because his younger brother, Ethan, is probably going to be the number one pick next year. So I actually was thinking about it. I think we're going to try to reach out to Leslie, because like I said, Leslie and Matt were nice enough to join us on our old show. Maybe we can get them on and see if we can get them to talk about the kids and just what it's like for Matt now to be a dad watching his sons play in the major leagues.
Yeah, and got to give credit to Matt, because I saw him on camera a couple of times last night. Not one single tear was shed that I saw from Matt Holliday when Jackson was out there. So kudos to Matt Holliday for continuing to show us the manly side of him, although we do know that he has a very emotional side and that he is very, very sentimental when it comes to things like that. I mean, obviously, we all remember his last at-bat for the Cardinals, which was just gut-wrenching, which is exactly what happened. And we know that, that gets him teared up as well. But to be able to have him there for Jackson's, first game, that was pretty special to see. And, yeah, if we get a chance to talk to them, I am all for it. So, well, that's going to do it for us. Lots of stuff that we talked about today, and we'll be back with you guys next week to continue to talk about the stuff, especially things going on in the Midwest, because as we know, you got the East and you got the West Coast bias. We don't have a Midwest bias. We need to have one, because we need to be talked about. We've got so many great sports going on in the Midwest, not just here in the state of Missouri, but across the entire heartland. So we are going to be back next week to talk about that one. Scott, anything else before we head out?
Nope, that's it. Everybody have a good week, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Do we know what day we're jumping on next week? Have we decided yet?
I don't think we've decided just yet. It looks like it might be tracking to Wednesday, because that's probably the best day for us to work together on getting that out. But we haven't figured it out yet. We're getting closer to a finalized schedule. I'll be out of town for the last week of April, so that one's gonna be tough. But after that, things should lock in pretty nicely, so you guys will be able to have us on a regularly scheduled basis. And once May hits, we may have some big time named guests coming on as well for getting this show restarted. So make sure you keep attention to all the socials and find out what we got going on and when our next show is. So for Scott Tobin, I'm Michael Wagenknecht, saying so long. Have a great weekend. It's going to be beautiful this weekend, so get out there and enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week.
Hey, it's U-Man here from Casey. For all your sports news, catch the Toasted Tavern with Scott Tobin and the Man Called Wags weeknights at 9 p.m. You can follow Toasted Tavern on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Let's get toasted.